All right. I'm watching for you. Yell when you're there. So Ron had to go use the bathroom, so you got me for just a second. Oh, we got somebody on. Hello. All right, I got to turn you down here. Ron will be right back so we can do our anniversary toast. Corey's waiting for us, which is very cool. We had a nice chat with him already. Thank you. Let's see. As always, I have technical issues. So I'll get there. Hold on. By the time Ron's here, I should be hopefully figuring out where I'm supposed to be.
Wrong?
Oh, nothing. I'm just waiting for you. Oh. So I'm getting stuff situated.
We've got people on.
We have people on.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. You know, one thing Ron and I always forget to do, and we talked about it last time, we never introduce ourselves. So my assumption, and it's incorrect, is that people know who I am, but they don't. My name is Lorene, and I am, we are the owners. It's actually a woman-owned business with me. I own Vino Latte, and Ron is, as you know, as of 18 years today, he is married to me, so he also owns the business by default.
By default.
By default, yes.
I always joke that I fix things and I lift heavy objects, and that's about it, really. And I drink a little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit. I talk about wine. So who do we have on? Got a bunch of people. Thank you very much for all the anniversary wishes. I think we mentioned it a little bit ago. We are supposed to be in France right now. We're going to be in France on a wine trip, traveling the entire country and drinking in all the different regions, and that would have been phenomenal. We have to figure out how to get back there. Just like our trips to Italy and Chile and Spain and South Africa for wine, every place has something fabulous to offer.
So I have my normal difficulties trying to find us. So I will find us. And Ron, of course, screwed me up because he had to go use the bathroom before we got started. But before I get to that, we should actually do our toast.
All right. So I don't know how many of you grabbed something to enjoy. You can't see that. This camera. So I'm using my boat anchor of a laptop for this. So it's not really great. But this is old. This is the Gosset champagne. So it is champagne. Bubbles, do you want a little bit more?
I do. You didn't give me hardly any. He's being stingy.
Not with bubbles, I'm not.
Good. That's good.
So champagne, obviously from the Champagne region of France. If it's made elsewhere, it cannot be called champagne.
So a couple weeks ago, we had Prosecco. That is from Italy. It is sparkling from Italy. It is not champagne.
It is not. Different grapes.
Well, that too.
It's different grapes.
But even if it was the same grapes, it could not be called champagne.
Correct. Yep.
Right.
But most specifically, they're different grapes and different styles, and they're made differently.
Yes.
So the other thing we have going on right now that is you may see later on is we have Matt Infield from Channel 7. He's standing over here.
He can come and peek in.
Pointing the camera at us. So he's going to...
These are the stars of the show. I'm not going to distract too much, I promise.
So he stopped in to do a quick little story. And so we've got a camera pointed at us. And we're going to get, as you know, we're going to get Corey Braunel from Dustin Valley on here shortly. We're just connecting with him. And he's hanging out in the waiting room. But we need a toast. So happy anniversary, honey.
Happy anniversary.
Cheers.
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 Cheers. Thank you all for joining us, for sharing your Monday night. It happens to be our anniversary with us. We appreciate it. We appreciate all of you. Looks like a lot of you have some delicious stuff that you're drinking. Thank you for sharing. If you're drinking something that that's not the Gosset, let us know what you're drinking. So,
you know that one of our mottos at the shop is drink more sparkling. We have it printed on the back of our sheets, or shirts, rather. And we just, every time we get the opportunity, we want to drink bubbles. Thanks, Angela. We love you guys.
And I do have you all on now. I figured out how to fix my Facebook thing here, so we are good. So, you want to talk just a little bit about the Gosset while we have a moment?
I don't know if I know anything about the Gosset other than it's great bubbles. I don't know
How about what Brut means?
So a Brut is basically in Champagne, well, in wine in general, but in Champagne, there's different terminology that refer to the amount of sugar or sweetness in the bubbles. And Brut is one of the drier, meaning one of the least amounts of sugar. There are some that are drier. Actually, I guess there's one. There's Brut Natural is more dry, less sugar. Syrah is drinking the Tenter Domaine Carneros Cuvée.
Nice,
That's
Sarah.
fabulous.
Yeah.
So this is a Brut, so not much sugar. In Champagne, there's 3 grapes that are permitted to be used in the production of Champagne. That is Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. And those are the 3 primary grapes that you see, and all Champagnes pretty much are those. There's a specific method that is used, and it's made in the bottle. So they do the secondary fermentation in the bottle that you are drinking out of with champagnes. And if you ever see method champenois or traditional method on a bottle of sparkling made anywhere else in California or anyplace else, it's made the same way, where they make a base wine. Then to the base wine, they add a little bit of sugar and yeast to get the bubbles, and they put a crown cap on it. They let it ferment in there. And then when they're ready to disgorge it, all of the lees through riddling, some hand riddling, some machine riddling, all the lees get stuck down in the neck of the bottle, the dead yeast cells. Then they do a disgorgement. Then they might put a little bit of sugar in it, and they put the cork in the cage on it.
I'm going to be geeky. I know what this means, but I want to make sure everybody else knows. What is riddling?
So riddling is a process that was actually, if I'm correct in my history,
Yes.
The Madame Clicquot of Veuve Clicquot, and some people pronounce that differently. I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. Developed a riddling table, and they drilled holes in a big board so that they could. I should use a. Do we have a cap? I'll show you. We don't. All right, so I'm not going to pour one of my bottles out, but you take the bottle, and after the dead yeast cells are in it, you slowly turn it a little bit and slowly tip it up. So as it starts to tip up, and it is on sur point, as they call it, or on the tip, the dead yeast cells through over time collect in the neck of the bottle. So eventually you take the bottle and it's got the dead yeast cells in it, and you turn it, and you turn it, and turn it, and it's in a hole in a board, and eventually it's up like this, and all the yeast cells are trapped here. Then they run it through like a liquid nitrogen, they freeze it, they turn it upside down, they pop the crown cork, the pressure blows the yeast out of it, and then they put a cork and a cage on it, and voila, you've got bubbles. And they might put some sugar in it if they want to sweeten it up.
That was very good.
Okay.
I asked about riddling.
Okay, riddling. So riddling is the process by which you manipulate the bottle so that the yeast cells collect in the neck. And now they have, they use what's called a gyro pallet. So they basically have a big cage full of a pallet of wine, which is, I think, well, I don't know if it's actually a pallet. I know a pallet's like 56 cases.
I don't know.
A bunch. And they do it mechanically, and it takes way less time, and you don't get carpal tunnel
I was going to
syndrome.
say, they actually get like injuries. Riddlers get injuries.
Right.
Yes, and not a jester. Not a jester like the Riddler.
No, not like the Riddler from Batman.
Right. Not that either.
Riddle me this.
Yes.
Right.
So, are we ready to bring Corey on?
We're a little bit early, but Corey's ready. I can see him. He's been drinking already.
We had a very brief chat with Corey before we got started, so we know he's ready. Oh, we're going to bring him on.
All right, so I'm going to bring you on, and I'm not going to do much of an introduction. They know who you are. They know why you're here, and so we're just looking forward to drinking and tasting. But you can give an intro and chat a little bit, Corey.
Well, shut up.
Well, cheers, guys. Happy anniversary. I'm really happy to be here with you guys. Vino Latte, near and dear to our heart, and really love the opportunity to get on with some of our friends from Wausau and Marathon County. So the homeland, so to speak, right? So I also appreciated what you had to say about sparkling wine, because sparkling wine is one of our favorite things that Cindy and I really like to enjoy. I know Janet and Chad do as well. So we drink sparkling every chance we get around here. Can you guys hear me okay?
Are you going to make some? Yeah, we can hear you.
So that was the fun thing about it was I was going to just say we actually this year in 2019 we made our first sparkler at Dusted Valley. We actually did a pet nat Pinot Noir that will actually be released I think next month. Very small amount, 25 cases is all. Just a really small experimental project. And then the other half of the lot we actually is a method champenoise, and that's we're going to basically be doing the bottling of that here probably within the next 30 days. And so we got to get the tirage together, and then we'll go through the secondary fermentation, and that'll probably I'm thinking probably be disgorged end of next year, something like that. So we're kind of going through the real traditional champagne methods.
So you skipped over it, and because I'm going to geek out over it, I'm going to let you explain to everybody what pet nat is, because they're getting big. We don't see a lot of them. We haven't. It hasn't hit here. I was just talking to a wine distributor, and he asked about it. And I said, no, we really haven't seen people asking or looking, but talk about it, and then maybe we'll start to sell some of them.
Well, pet nats are a lot of fun, and I think that unlike champagne or unlike prosecco or a product that uses a method champenoise, which Ron, you explained that whole method champenoise process really well. Pet nat is pétillant naturel. What basically means is that the entire process is taking place in the bottle. So the primary fermentation is taking place in the bottle. So what you're left with in terms of the sparkling portion is based on what happened with the base fermentation when the juice had sugar in it before yeast were introduced. It was then bottled. We inoculated it with yeast, and the yeast were stirred into the tank, and then from there, as it started to ferment, just before fermentation kicks off, we put it in the bottle and we allow the fermentation to take place in the bottle, and then that produces the sparkling process, as opposed to a method champenoise, which is fermenting a base wine dry and then disgorging the unclarified yeast and introducing what's called a secondary fermentation to create the sparkle. So it's a little more variable, to be honest.
So how much fermentation, or do you with a pet nat, do they let it ferment a little bit in tank and then bottle it so it's not a full ferment in bottle? I mean, because you're talking 115 or more PSI inside the bottle of pressure.
And before you go further, pet nat, say what Corey did say it, but I want.
It's pétillant naturel, right?
Yeah.
So PET is the
close enough
PET.
for a couple of folks from north central Wisconsin, right? That's about as French as I'm going to get. Sorry.
So pet nat, it's not like a natural pet. It's not like an organic dog. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the whole idea is that the sparkling is coming from this natural kind of primary fermentation, as opposed to a reintroduced fermentation, as in the method champenoise. The method champenoise is a more exact science to have a product that has less bottle to bottle variability, whereas with pet nat, you're trying to create a homogeneous mixture before you introduce it to the bottle. And yes, to your point, there is some primary fermentation that's already starting to take place, but we also are picking these at a lot less sugar ripeness. So I think our pet nat was probably picked at under 20 bricks, and then had acid of probably somewhere around 10 grams per liter. So pretty high acid, low sugar. whereas a red wine is being picked closer to 24 to 26 Brix. And as you know, in terms of sugar concentration, that's an exponential difference in terms of resulting alcohol. So in our situation, the Pet Nat's going to be under 13% alcohol and have really nice high crisp acidity. And what's really kind of interesting is that being that it's our first time, it's also kind of interesting to see some of them are a little bit fizzier than others. Some have more bubbles, some have less bubbles. That's kind of the beauty of Pet Nat. And as you've seen when you're probably talking to your various wholesalers, they aren't there are some that are in the $30 to $40 range, but there's a lot of them in that I think in that high teens to mid 20s, which are a lot of fun. They're just a really enjoyable wine, especially I think like summer coming in Wisconsin. Great wine to have on the deck or out on the boat.
So one last geek question about Pet Nat, and then we'll move on to your wines. Do they do a riddling and a disgorgement with that? Because if they're doing it, you've got the lees still in there.
Correct. Yeah, there's
Okay.
a little for us wing shooters in Wisconsin. We if you've ever reloaded your own shotgun shells, you know the terminology of what a wad is in a shotgun shell. The wad is basically what holds the BBs and separates it from the powder. Well, in when we're actually fermenting in a vessel in the bottle, we use what's called a badul. And a badul is just a little piece of plastic that literally looks like a wad from a shotgun shell, and that goes into the neck under the crown cap. And so when we bottle it, the wine is actually put down on its cap, and then the yeast collect in the badul. And basically, what the badul does is it collects that yeast and kind of compacts it into a little bullet. And once that bullet is down in the neck and it's firm, we then move to a process of disgorgement. And what happens is we take a bottle, because we don't have any dosage that we're putting in to fill up the neck. We actually take wine from another bottle of Pet Nat, and we fill the ullage or the headspace after disgorgement. But we go through the same disgorgement process as you would with a method champenoise.
So I'm guessing that badul and bidet have the same root word.
I think you might be right, actually.
All right.
The same explosiveness can occur.
Yeah. So we've got like 7:04. I think that we're probably all on and ready to go. So Corey, maybe just a little bit for the folks out there on your background, you and Cindy and Janet, and your roots and what drove you here, and then just a little bit about Dustin Valley.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a quick shout out to some of our friends up there. I just saw join Leif Christensen and Tracy Ugeritz. Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining. Always good to see friendly names out there. So as Ron and Laureen shared with you guys, Dustin Valley was started by myself along with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law and my wife, Cindy. Cindy and Janet are sisters that grew up on the quintessential dairy farm, Krause Acres, in Edgar, Wisconsin. And I grew up in Marathon City. My brother-in-law, Chad, grew up in Chippewa Falls. And 2019 actually marked that was our 17th vintage in Washington State. Time flies when you're having fun, let me tell you. Can you guys believe it? 17 years.
Wow.
It's been probably, I would say, close to 8 years since you guys have been out. Visited.
We're looking forward to the next trip, though.
That sounds great. Love to have you out. So today we farm about 60 acres of vines here in the valley, and that's between 3 different vineyards. We have a 10-acre vineyard at our winery site called Scotty Block after our Wisconsin heritage. Definitely proud Wisconsin Badgers. And then we have another 2 sites on the Oregon side of the Walla Walla Valley. As Ron and Laureen know, the Walla Walla Valley is tucked down in southeastern Washington State. We're about 4 hours east of Portland and about 4 hours south and east of Seattle. So we're closer to Idaho, if that makes sense to you guys geographically, than we are to Seattle or Portland. So our typical growing conditions here in eastern Washington, our total precipitation per year is usually about 7 to 10 inches. We have beautiful, hot, sunshine-filled days that are cooled off in the evening. We have a diurnal shift from daytime high to nighttime low of about 40 degrees, which really brings out this beautiful natural acidity. So that's a little bit about our story and what we're doing out here and why we're growing it out here.
And you mentioned that maybe you didn't. Maybe I missed it. Chad is from Chippewa Falls, correct? Oh, you did.
Chippewa Falls. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So let's go on to the
All right.
first
You want to
wine.
talk about Pinot Gris?
So the order we're going to be tasting stuff in is, we talked to Corey a little bit before, the Boomtown Pinot Gris first, then we're going to do the Stain 2 Syrah, and then we're going to do the Cabernet. But I know because you are Vino Latte customers, you've already been drinking, and you've probably already tasted all of them. So as long as you can still taste along, we're going to do that. I'm going to mostly shut up, and Corey's going to tell you all about the wines.
And I am probably going to hop in and out because I know these two have their own little banter going. So you guys don't need to see me or hear me. So.
Oh, yes, we do.
Well, we love having you, Lorraine. Please do come back. All right. So shout out to Vicki Briggs Christensen. Good to see you, Vicki. Thanks for joining. So you guys are tasting the 2018 Pinot Gris. And I actually... I'm cheating a little bit. It's my Midwest honesty. I got to be honest with you. I'm actually tasting the 2019 because I don't have the 18 here. We sold out of the 18 in March, so you guys have the last of the 18. It's a beautiful vintage. The 18 is absolutely striking. The 19 is pretty stellar as well, I must say. I love Pinot Gris. I don't think it gets enough attention. The reason we call it Pinot Gris and Pinot Grigio are the exact same thing. Pinot Grigio really took off I would say in the early 2000s, Ron. And we definitely saw people taking a liking to high acid, low pH, really crisp, steely whites. And Pinot Gris is on that same curve, but the reason we call it Pinot Gris is typically considered to be more centric to Alsace and northern France and western Germany. And those wines tend to have just a little bit more richness to them than they do from Italy, where they grow in northern Italy in the region of Alto Adige, which is a really famous region in northern Italy where Pinot Grigio really rings true. Those wines tend to be a little bit lighter bodied, a little bit higher acid. Pinot Gris tends to be just a little bit more rich, has a little more richness in the mouthfeel, and can have a little bit of sweetness to it as well. That's why we call it Pinot Gris versus Pinot Grigio. Again, same grape, same variety, just got their names based on the colloquialism from where they originated. So Pinot Gris. What's that, Ron?
We actually, on one of the prior tastings, we had the Firesteed Pinot Gris, and talked exactly about the same thing you're saying, that Pinot Grigio from Italy tends to be really light and water-like and very easy and simple, whereas certainly from Alsace you get a little more texture. But I actually think that some of the Washington Pinot Gris I've had are way more textural, and that lushness on the palate, a little pith, a little bit of grip, a little bit of depth that you don't find in Italy. That's my take.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. These wines tend to be a little bit more, rich and full body, to be honest with you. And that's funny to say when you're talking about Pinot Gris, because typically Pinot Grigio, Pinot Gris are wines that really people don't really give a lot of thought to or consideration to. Let's face it, they're called porch pounders, and they're built to be drank. They're not built to be aged typically, although I've had our wine, in the cellar. We pulled it out over a 3-4 year period, and the wines are drinking beautifully fresh under a screw cap. Yeah, they're meant to be consumed.
So let's talk real briefly about that, because I'm in prior sessions we've talked a little bit about closures, and of course I know you guys exclusively screw cap across your entire line. So talk a little bit about that for people and explain. I know Chad geeked out over some studies way back when about how much oxygen and air interchange with Stelvin. Just delve into that a little bit, because you're selling some premium wines with screw cap, and people need to understand that, as I always say, you don't judge a book by its cover, and you don't judge a wine by its closure.
Right, that's absolutely true. First, a shout out to Melissa Engelking right there. Sorry, yeah, it's not the A's. We take the chance to beat the A's every chance we get. She was flipping me a little shit about my Mariners shirt, so I had to give it to her. Missing baseball though, aren't we? Love my Brewers too, by the way, everybody. Really love watching those guys go deep in the postseason. Hopefully we can see that come back here pretty quick. But yeah, a little 411 on screw caps. I love what we started out in 2005 with. We went 100% screw cap after our second vintage. We wanted to go initially right out of the gates, but we couldn't get a truck out here. There was no truck available to put the screw caps on. So we had to start out with a synthetic cork. My brother-in-law, Chad, has a food science background. He graduated from Stout in their food science program. And so quality control was his background in food processing. And when we started the winery, natural cork wasn't even an option in terms of quality control. At the time we started out, greater than 10% of wines were flawed due to the trichloroanisole or cork taint molecule, and which gave that wine that dank basement smell, which I'm sure you talked to the Vino Latte faithful about many times before. So we adopted the technology pretty early on, and have been so impressed with the freshness and, quite frankly, the ageability in our biggest, boldest reds and most expensive wines. We have a $135 bottle of wine that we put under screw cap, and it's one of those things. We believe in the science, and we believe in science over the tradition, frankly. And I think I was telling you before we got on earlier, before Ron, we did a library tasting with about 20 customers the other night on Saturday evening, and we tasted Chardonnay from 2008, 2010, and 2008, 2011, and 2012. And the 2008 Chardonnay, that's a wine that's 12 years old, and typically is going to be showing some really deep straw colored and starting to pick up notes of hazelnut and almond, and kind of starting to move into some of that honeysuckle and starting to show some oxidation characters. Hopefully you haven't gone to brown apple and those kinds of characters, then it's cooked or over the hill. But it's showing so much freshness and beautiful balance and integrity. So what we find is that our wines age under screw cap beautifully. They just age slower than they would under a natural cork. And that's comparing it to a full 2 3/4 inch natural cork. And the reason screw caps even really took off was that countries like Australia were getting the worst corks in the world, because there's just a limited amount of natural cork that meets the premium grade. So the Aussies were getting bad cork, and they were getting frustrated having to put their wines under lesser cork than that of Premier Cru or of the best Bordeaux houses. So they started to innovate with this technology and really started to work with the polymers to create the closure to allow it to breathe. Because going back to where screw caps came from in the 60s to where they are today, the technology has evolved tremendously. And it all has to do with the inside of the cap. If you guys can see that, there's that white piece on the inside. That's called Syrah. And Syrah is a liner that gets its name from saran wrap. It's a licensed polymer that has a breathability and 1/2 the oxygen transfer rate as a natural cork, as opposed to the old foil back. If you ever take a screw cap off and see a silver liner, that's an old foil back, which means it only has roughly about 15% oxygen transfer, or OTR, compared to a natural cork. So a much tighter closure yet.
So for everybody out there who complains about when I geek out over wine stuff, this is kick ass right here. All right, so I know Lorene's been hammering away. What's that?
We have a comment that I want.
We have a comment.
We have a comment that Corey, I want you to address. Somebody's talking about the legs. Tell us about the relevance of legs.
Well, first of all, legs are relevant in every species. I love legs. I think most people do. In the context of wine, Lorene, I'll try to answer that. So in wine, legs, what do they mean? What is it all about? And really, legs, through the years, I've heard a lot of information or misinformation about legs and what they mean. And there was this idea that legs meant something of quality. And really, the only thing that legs mean is what the level of glycerol is in the wine. And glycerol is a compound that essentially is naturally occurring. It's a byproduct of fermentation, and it tends to happen when you have more fermentable sugars. If the body of the wine is a little bit more full-bodied and rich, it'll tend to have a higher glycerol level, and therefore tend to have a higher amount of legs. Sometimes when you swirl a glass of wine, it has to do with the weight of the wine. Essentially, when you swirl the glass of wine, if there's a tremendous amount of trails on the wine glass, you can see a little bit there. There's a nice coating here, and so it's there. You're starting to see the legs form.
So when you the things that I've always heard and sort of spoken about, the body of the wine, the weight of the wine comes from primarily two things: alcohol, or the glycerol, and sugar. So really sweet wines can cling to the body or to the glass a lot because there's body weight to it. So like you said, this is like 13.5% alcohol. So there's not really residual sugar. So it's going to be a lighter weight wine. You're not going to see a lot of legs, but that has zero to do with quality.
Yeah, exactly, Ron. I think so. I think legs are just like when we're looking at legs on a human being, they're just sexy to look at and talk about.
There you go.
Would you look at the legs on that one? There you have it.
Yeah. All right. On that note, and I've got a because Leaf was asking. Oh, Lorene's telling you it's a Robert Graham. So there you go.
All right. I love it.
He's asking about my shirt. I love Robert Graham shirts. I wish I could afford to buy more of them. All right. Shall we move on to the second wine? Does anybody have any input on the Pinot Gris? Any other comments?
When is the 2019?
I'll just go ahead. What did you say?
When the 2019 is available
To us.
Tell us.
As soon as Wisconsin sells out of the 2018, they'll be in the 19. That's always a great question that you ask that. I mean, I think that we're probably very close to shipping 2019 in Wisconsin. The 2018, actually, right now, I would be drinking all the 2018 I can get my hands on, just because it's aromatically it's going to be more present than the 2019. What I find is it takes about 6 months in bottle to really start to build weight and recover the aromatics. So I always like drinking and purchasing the vintage previous, because it's more back together. What I mean by that is these wines go through filtration because they're white wines. They need to be sterile filtered. So we don't, unlike champagne or method champenoise, we don't want this to re-ferment in the bottle. So we have to make sure all the yeast are filtered out of it. So they go through sterile filtration down to 0.45 microns nominal, which filters out all the yeast cells. When it does that, what happens is it breaks up some of the flavor molecular structure a little bit. Those flavor molecules definitely come back together. They just take a little time to kind of it's like being put through a pasta roller a little bit. I'm a little bit flattened. I'm a little bit out of shape, and I need to kind of bounce back. So it takes some time for that to occur. So 2018 is in the wheelhouse right now,
Which is
all along with sunshine.
To throw a common vernacular that some people have probably heard and may not understand, one of the things that they may reference that is bottle shock, where you do your filter and your fining and you throw it in the bottle and the wine's been beaten up a little bit. And if you crack that bottle right away, it might be a little unsettled and not showing what it's going to show. And so the term that's sort of come about is bottle shock, right?
That's right. Absolutely. That is absolutely the definition of bottle shock right there.
All right.
Just a TV show or movie, not just a movie.
Oh yeah, and then of course Lorraine says if any of you have seen the movie Bottle Shock, which was sort of a pseudo documentary about the 1976 Paris tasting and Chateau Montelena, where they had the issue with their Chardonnay. That's the name of the movie is sort of a reference to that situation.
Good movie. It's fun.
Good movie, but
Fun movie.
yeah, but yeah,
It's a fun movie.
It's a Hollywood representation of
It's a fun movie.
incredibly historic
It is a fun movie.
that
It's okay. Watch it.
never mind.
I think it's a lot of fun, and it's it to me any movies that are out there making wine more fun and exciting, whether some of us geeks may say that that's a little bit dumbed down for Hollywood or whatever the case may be, or half truths or whatever the case may be, as long as it's making wine more approachable and fun and interesting as a beverage to be enjoyed and consumed, I'm all thumbs up.
Absolutely. All right, so we're moving on to the Stained Tooth Syrah. So let's talk a little bit about the wine and the name of the wine and why you guys chose the name of the wine. And while you, and Chad's connection and his dad, and so you can talk about that. And while you're talking, I'm going to run and grab a prop real quick.
Did you just say you're going to run and
So
grab
you go. I'm going to grab a prop.
Prop. Okay.
And I will take his place momentarily.
That's funny. I thought he said he was going to go get a pop. I'm like, he's going to get a pop. Okay, that's cool. So Stained Tooth was the first wine that we ever released in the 2003 vintage. So it's been with us from the very beginning. And Stained Tooth really started out as a joke with regards to our wives. Chad and I were in Napa. I think it would have been 99, 98, 99. And we were tasting these awesome Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignons, and our teeth literally were black at the end of the afternoon. And the place that we were renting had a cedar soaking tub, which is really kind of classic Napa Valley, right? And so we were in there soaking and drinking some more Napa Valley Cab, because why wouldn't you? And our wife said, "Will you come out and brush your teeth so we can go to dinner now?" And we said, "No, we can't do that because it's going to ruin our palates." And they said, "Well, we're not going to dinner with you." So we ended up having these black stained teeth, and we told them that someday we were going to name a wine after our stained teeth, and we did. Stained Tooth Syrah. So that was our first release, and then we took that name and we adapted it to our wine club, which is called the Stained Tooth Society. And we had a lot of fun with it. And Chad's dad, is a dentist. So we were able to have some fun with that as well. And when you sign up as a wine club member at Dusted Valley, you get a Dusted Valley Oral-B toothbrush, just like you would if you went and visited your dentist. It says Dusted Valley Stained Tooth Society on it, the whole 9 yards. Pretty classic. So it's all about making wine fun. As Ron shares with you the large format there, it looks like is that a 3 liter?
I think it's bigger than that.
I think that's a 9.
I think it's a 9 liter.
Wow, I couldn't even appreciate. They always say things look bigger on screen. I don't know. It just doesn't look bigger to me on screen.
6 liter.
6 liter. All right. Well, that's a party in a bottle.
So we were out in Washington, and they had this one at the winery.
They being Dusted Valley.
Yeah, Dusted Valley. When we visited Corey and gang, it's an etched bottle, and it is the 2006 Reserve Syrah in this big bottle. And we bought this and brought it home, and we opened it for my 50th birthday party. But anyway, so this is a normal bottle of wine. This is the 6 liter.
Yeah, that's
We
awesome.
finished it in one day. Yeah, it was awesome. And the saying on the back of the shorts, I don't know if you guys still use it, and I don't know if it's really attributable to Chad's dad, but his life is too short to stain your teeth with cheap wine or something like that.
That's exactly it. Almost verbatim. Good job, Ron. Yeah, but it's still on the back of our shirts, and you're right. The quote did originate with Dr. Dan Johnson, DDS. Also a former Eau Claire boy himself, graduate of University of Wisconsin, and practiced dentistry in Billings, Montana for many, many years before he retired.
So let's let's talk about the wine itself.
Yeah. Why don't you you guys are drinking the 16 tonight. Ron, why don't you tell us a little bit about the blend on it, and I can tell you a little bit more about the winemaking technique.
Yeah, so this is 100% Syrah, Columbia Valley from the Stony Vine Estate and Stone Tree, aged in second and neutral puncheons. 13% whole cluster. Let's see what else. What's everybody smelling and getting out of this?
We got somebody Forest Floor and Black Olives.
Forest Floor and Black Olives. So I'm going to throw my 2 cents worth in on Washington Syrah. Syrah is a great, when you drink it, you generally think of Rhone Valley, Rhone, France, where it is the staple of pretty much any Rhone wine. And in the far northern reaches, Côte Rôtie, it's going to be 100% Syrah. And that is really terroir driven, really dirty, earthy, maybe a little poopy, a little barny. Animal comes to, meaty. And then you throw in, if you look at the gamut of Syrah, then you start to look at California. And I think California Syrah tends to drive a little bit more on the fruit side. And that's temperature, that's climate, that's warmer climate, as we've always discussed. Riper fruit is going to give more fruit character in the wine. And you could equate the same, what I just described, I described with Pinot Noir too, from Burgundy and from California. And then you throw in Oregon in the middle of that Pinot Noir discussion, it sort of like falls in the middle. I think Syrah from Washington, they're doing, as far as I'm concerned, Syrah as good, but slightly different than they do in France. And I think they're generally doing it better than California. And I love Washington Syrah, and I love Washington Merlot, hands down. I think they're doing a phenomenal job, and this is great. It's been a long time, Corey, since I've had this.
I'm glad you're liking it, Ron. I think you just really summed up Syrah really very perfectly. I think the interesting thing about Syrah is Syrah is a variety people love to drink Syrah. When they get it in their mouths and they just absolutely enjoy Syrah. It's less polarizing in terms of when people actually drink it and put it in their mouths. There's so much polish to Syrah. But selling Syrah is really, really, really hard because Syrah doesn't have notoriety like Cabernet Sauvignon or Pinot Noir. And those are the two main reds that sell in the United States today. Syrah is very, very distant in terms of its percentage of sales as a variety. And I think one of the biggest reasons why is because a lot of people don't have the experience of what to expect from Syrah from a particular region. And I'll explain that by saying with Cabernet Sauvignon, the degree of varietal character of Cabernet Sauvignon is a much narrower band, if you will. If you don't have Cabernet Sauvignon ripe, it gets very green and weedy, and the consumer never even sees it. And if you get Cabernet Sauvignon overly ripe, it just becomes this kind of ubiquitous red that doesn't have a lot of character. So winemakers are really kind of tempted to ripen it in this very narrow band, and therefore it kind of grows in this really narrow band as well. It ripens in a very narrow band. Whereas Syrah has a spectrum that's off the screen wide, okay? So much more varietal character. You have cool climate Syrah, much cooler climates than even Washington. And then you have very warm climate Syrah, like Ron, you suggest California or the Barossa Valley of Australia, as opposed to South Australia, which again gets very cool again. And so there's all this really tremendous variability in terms of where Syrah can thrive and create wines that are really distinct and beautiful. And I think Syrah shows terroir almost as good or better than any red variety that winemakers craft red wine from. So I think that's its blessing, and it's also its curse, because the consumer is like, well, what's in the bottle, right? It almost becomes like now I'm purchasing an old world wine where it's named after place rather than varietal, where I have this varietal typicity in my mind. I think this is what Syrah is going to be. Syrah can be very, very wildly and vastly different. So Stained Tooth kind of takes on a real interesting counterbalance to that. Ron, you mentioned the two vineyards that it comes from. It comes from Stone Tree, which is on the Walla Slope in central Washington. It's a very, very warm site. It's one of the warmest growing sites in Washington State. The daytime highs can be 110 degrees, but the evening drops off about 50 degrees in temperature. So it keeps the acid high in those grapes. But we have ripe flavors that move more towards black and blue fruits and much more fruit forward, as opposed to Stony Vine, which is our estate vineyard in Walla Walla. In Stony Vine, which you guys visited before in the Rocks District, Stony Vine Vineyard is a much cooler site, and that site gives off a lot of more earthy, animal, roasted meats, black olive tamponade. Laureen says, I pick up black olive in there. Absolutely. It also tends to be a higher pH and lower acid site. And so we do stem fermentation, which means we put the whole cluster into the fermenter, stems and all, and we try to bring more tannin extraction out of the stems, which gives that particular lot more structure. We blend that with the more fruit-forward site from Stone Tree, and you end up with something that has beautiful balance of fruit, and then these secondary characteristics that have that animal, roasted meat, olive, and this kind of real worldly expression to them.
So Bart is asking, is Stained Tooth always 100% Syrah?
It's a great question, Bart. Bart, I think you maybe have had some previous vintages that have had Viognier co-fermented in them. And every year we do a small lot of Syrah that has Viognier, the white grape Viognier, fermented into it. And that's something that was done originally in Côte Rôtie in the northern Rhone. And it was done there to stabilize the color. There's cofactors in Viognier that help stabilize the color. We don't have a problem with color in Washington. We get beautiful color extraction here because our warmer climate than Côte Rôtie and Northern Rhone. But we do it because aromatically it tends to present something that's more pleasing or interesting. And we get a little bit more of like a crushed violet kind of character that comes out of the wine as a result of that. The 2016 that you're drinking, though, is 100% Syrah. There was no Viognier co-fermented in that vintage because the Viognier co-fermented lot didn't make the quality standard for the Dusted Valley label. We only do 750 cases of Saint Two Syrah total. And so if it doesn't meet the cut, it doesn't go in. So that gets pushed out. That gets pushed out into other products like Boomtown Syrah, as an example, or it may get sold off as bulk line.
So
I actually want to interject a little bit because we are huge fans of Dusted Valley, and that's why we bought the huge bottle. And I want to share this. I don't know.
It's not going to work.
Yeah, there you all can see it.
Oh, there it is.
That's Ron on his 50th birthday wearing another Robert Graham, by the way. It's an orange one, pouring the very last of that bottle. And that's why it was such a special bottle to us. And the Dusted Valley boys are that relevant to us that that's what he was serving on his 50th. So
thank you very much.
Down to the last drop.
I remember you sending that. I didn't see. I never saw that movie clip, but I did see a still photo of that. That was pretty awesome. You showed me the lineup for your 50th before they were open, and that was like one of the only. That was like, again, that's one of the only bottles, as you know, Ron, that we actually have to put a natural cork in because we can't find screw caps big enough. So when anyone opens one of those, I just kind of sweat. Oh my gosh, I hope it's not corked, you know.
Yeah, especially one that big.
Yeah.
Two geeky things. First, I've always thought that Syrah, and what I've learned is that Syrah is like basically one of the foremost tannic grape varietals. So you've got Syrah, Cab, Tannat, and Nebbiolo being, as a grape, having the most tannin. So with that in mind, tell me the variance of tannin that you get from doing whole cluster and bringing in that tannin from the stems, and why wouldn't you just do a little bit heavier extraction from the skins during alcoholic fermentation or something that's going to pull that tannin out?
That's great. Great question. And so Ron's question is on point because tannins are soluble solids, and tannins, everybody, is what gives that wine structure, right? Tannins and acid are what give wine structure. Alcohol will amplify both tannin and acid, but your structure comes from tannin and acid. So tannins are these soluble solids that are typically present in grape skins, in the grape seeds, and in the stems of grapes. That's where tannins live, or that's where they originate. And we typically the best tannins, quality tannins, are in the skins. Those are your high quality tannins. Tannins that are in seeds and tannins that are in stems tend to be lesser quality. They tend to be a little bit more rustic, a little bit more aggressive. They also tend to be a little bit more oxidative and can precipitate out of wine as well. So we try to maximize the tannin extraction from skins during primary or alcoholic fermentation, as Ron mentioned. In certain sites, when we talk about varieties in terms of the generalities of grape varieties, we can talk about them being relatively more tannic than another grape variety. And Ron's right in saying that Syrah tends to be a higher tannin grape. However, it's really variably dependent upon where it's growing. In our vineyards, in Walla Walla, in the Stony Vine vineyard, the amount of tannin in the skins is very low by comparison to the amount of tannin in the skin in Stone Tree Vineyard on the Wally Slope. There's a lot of reasons as to why that is, but it really has to do predominantly based on the place that it's growing as to why there isn't as much tannin present in those skins as it is in a vineyard that's 2 hours away. So that, and remember what I said about acid. Acid's the other structure component. So Stony Vine Vineyard has a very low acid and high pH because those are on inverse curves. Low pH, high acid, high pH. So because there's low acid at Stony Vine Vineyard, you don't have a lot of structure. You don't have a lot of skin tannin, and you don't have a lot of acid. So therefore, you are low in structure, as opposed to Stone Tree, where you have acid and tannin present in the skin. So therefore, we do the whole cluster fermentation technique at Stony Vine to extract those stem tannins into that Syrah to give it that more structure that it needs, backbone structure, and so it can stand on its own two legs. So as such, those wines, and what's really cool about that is because you have all these other characters of roasted meat, olive, all of those kinds of funky characters, those rustic tannins that you get from stems really are complementary to Stony Vine Syrah.
Yeah, it's great. And the tannins have really, obviously this is, what's current vintage of this, of the Stained Tooth?
What's that? I'm sorry?
What's current vintage of the Stained Tooth?
16 is 16. We moved into 17. 17 we started selling at the end of last year into distribution. I'm actually drinking the 17 in the tasting room right now tonight. The 17 actually has 2% Viognier. So once the 17 comes back out, it'll have the Viognier co-ferment in it again. But everything as far as vineyard wise is predominantly exactly the same of what we just talked about: Stone Tree and Stony Vine.
Yeah. So the tannin structure in the 16 is really nice. It's really, I won't say fine, but it's really pleasing. It's got great mouthfeel. I think everybody else has pretty much already commented on what they're smelling and tasting and getting from it. But it's got meat and savory.
Ryan got blood. I think that's interesting, like the metallicness of blood.
I got fish, are you?
Yeah, we call that kind of iron, bloody iron, kind of ferrous kind of quality. That definitely comes off of Stone Tree Vineyard. Good notes, Ryan. I think that Syrah definitely can have that bloody, gamey kind of character. To me, these kinds of Syrahs, they really need food. This is definitely a wine that can be enjoyed by itself as a cocktail. Its little brother, the Boomtown Syrah, is all about enjoyment and drinkability and being able to pour it back. And this wine here is a wine that it takes a step up in its seriousness, right? More structured, more complex, got a little bit more guts, got a little bit more going on. Says, hey, think about me a little bit, and consider me. What else do I put this with? And so, I mean, I think back to like growing up in Wisconsin. This is my venison wine right here, no question. This is my venison wine.
And we tasted with this group. We tasted the Boomtown Syrah back in like week 2 or something.
Yeah, you've been on with us before, Corey.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, awesome.
I want to comment a couple things. Yes, John, we are still on the Syrah, but I, as the
slave driver,
I'm going to move us on now. Sorry, guys. I know you guys could go on forever. We're going to move on to the cab.
No, I actually, I'm going to go back because I have one more geeky thing, because you don't see it often, and people use different words for different things. So everybody hears, it's aged in oak for this long, but nobody really puts words to the vessel. So this one was specifically a puncheon. And of course, we know there's different size barrels, and they matter. I mean, the amount of wood and the volume of liquid to wood ratio is really important. So you guys do this one in puncheons.
So we'll talk about puncheons, then we'll move on to the cab.
Yeah, and absolutely. Ron, you let me walk right into that one because size does matter. You're absolutely correct. This wine is aged in puncheon, which puncheon is 500 liter, and a regular wine barrel is a 59-gallon barrel, which is 225 liters. And the French term for that is barrique. And it's a small 59-gallon barrel. So this is a 500, so it's 2.4 barrels, regular barrels. So the idea and the premise behind using puncheons with Syrah is that you have less surface area to come in contact with the wine in a puncheon than you do in a barrique. So
As a ratio. As a ratio, less surface area is a ratio to the amount of liquid.
That is correct. So
Yeah.
you have less surface area in a ratio in contact with the liquid in the barrel, and therefore the oak characteristic in a small 59-gallon or 225-liter barrique will become more impactful in a short period of time than in a puncheon. In a puncheon, you're going to have less oak influence into the wine. Secondarily, oak staves are porous, and so they breathe. And so in a puncheon, you have less oxygen transfer through the barrel stave because of the fact that, again, you have less surface area as a ratio in contact with the staves. So you tend to put things that are more highly oxidative, like Grenache, Mourvedre. They're typically exclusively aged in barriques, or excuse me, into puncheons, the 500-liter version. We choose to use these vessels for Syrah because we're trying to have the oak take more of a back seat. We want this to really be about the sense of place, the beautiful freshness, acidity, secondary characteristics that Lorene pointed out immediately. Olive, Ryan talked about Ferris and bloody, that gamey kind of characteristic. We want those kinds of things to be more of the predominance of that coming out rather than the toasty oak flavors that you sometimes can find. Syrah really soaks up oak very, very quickly, and it shows oak very quickly as compared to other varieties like we're going to taste next.
Right. So Barb says that she's enjoying marathon cheese with your wine tonight. So
Shout out.
yeah, a little shout out.
Good to hear you. Good to see you. I love it. I love Marathon Cheese. I worked there for a short second in my college days. Good summer job at Marathon Cheese. So love that community, near and dear to my heart.
So let's move on to the last wine. We're drinking the 2017 Columbia Valley Cabernet. And on the tech sheet, everybody else has the tech sheet, but I'll do a quick rundown. 94% Cab, 4% Petit Verdot, 2% Merlot. Vineyards are Southwind, Dionysius, and Stone Tree. Aged in 35% new French oak.
Yes.
So that's the wine.
Absolutely. Cabernet Sauvignon. I mean, this is really the variety that I think winemakers are benchmarked on because it is so prevalent in terms of what people consume. It's the #1 red grape variety sold in the United States today. Cabernet Sauvignon is king. It's often referred to as the king of red grapes. It commands the highest price points across the red wine world, vis-a-vis that of Pinot Noir from Grand Cru, Classe, and Burgundy. And so you have. I was reading an article on California Napa Valley Cabernet just the other morning. Mr. Beckstoffer in Beckstoffer Vineyards, he sells his grapes to vintners for 100 times the bottle price, and a lot of the Cabernet Sauvignon coming out of Beckstoffer Vineyards are $250 a bottle, so $25,000 a ton for some fruit. I'm happy to say that Vested Valley is not $250 a bottle. And quite frankly, I would actually put it up against a lot of bottles that are tipping price points well above where it brings in at. Washington Cabernet is tremendous quality for the money. and you get everything and way more than what you're looking for in Cabernet from Washington. We kind of touched on growing conditions and climate previous in the conversation this evening, but Cabernet is just this beautiful, structured red wine that shows beautiful fruit, a lot of mineral in this wine. You get a lot of that beautiful kind of gooseberry, and there's cherry, and a lot of those kinds of beautiful characteristics that you would be looking for. Currant, those kinds of characters. 35% new French oak. This wine will go as high as 45% new French oak on vintage. This is a variety that can handle more new oak. And we are working more and more of our Walla Walla Valley Estate vineyard into this bottling. This is a bottling that typically is retailing under $40 typically around the U.S. and is always scoring anywhere from 90 to 92 points across the board.
So one of the questions we've gotten many times, and I see Chuck ask it again, when you look at, the acid in this wine is really present, which is, I don't necessarily find that in red wine, acid stands out as one of the structural components because the tannin so often overrides acid. But as Corey talked about, and I think I've mentioned in prior discussions, we do what we call a component tasting when we do our Wineversity series. And we taste in individual cups. We taste acid, basically like citric acid diluted in water. We taste tannin, like actually grape tannin that we buy in powdered form and we dilute it in water. We taste alcohol, where we dilute vodka in water, and then we taste sugar diluted in water. And I identify those as the four primary components, structural and relative components within wine. And when you taste them in isolation, the effects stand out, very obvious when you taste them each individually. And then at the end of that little session where we taste our wines, we pour them into a glass and we encourage the students to taste them together. And the only thing that is ever missing from that end result is fruit, like the character of the fruit. But this wine, as a red wine, the tannin and the acid structure stand out. So my mouth was watering as I was trying to talk. So going back to my original thought, sorry about that. When we look at blends and you see like there's a 1%, or in this case, a 3%, I think, right? 4% or 2% Merlot. That small of percentage of grape blended into this much Cabernet, talk about the effects of that, how much that small percentage actually adds to the overall blend.
Love to. Winemaking is very scientific. We're very geeky about winemaking. And when it comes to blending, that's where the art part of winemaking comes to the forefront. Because it's just, blending is everything like cooking. So winemaking is scientific because what we're doing is we're inoculating, we're shepherding yeast through this fermentation, and we're constantly analyzing temperature and sugar levels, and we're looking at yeast assimilable nitrogen, feeding the yeast, and so it's a very scientific experiment. It's chemistry and biology and microbiology. When we move towards blending, that's where the artful side of winemaking really starts to occur. And blending, to me, is one of the absolute, that's where you start to, you either like a winemaker's style or you don't like a winemaker's style. And so my take is, if you find a winemaker style that you like, then you're probably going to like everything that winemaker does, right? And so blending is such a critical component to what we actually do. And I can't stress that enough. Tomorrow we start blending the 2019 Bordeaux. And it's my favorite aside from harvest, it's my favorite time of the year when we actually get a chance to. We've gone through at this point. We've force ranked all of our different wines. So all the different lots of Cabernet, all the different lots of Merlot, all the different lots of Petit Verdot, all the different lots of Cabernet Franc, all the different lots of Malbec. Those are the 5 different Bordeaux varieties that we make at Dustin Valley. So we've gone through and we've force ranked qualitatively where those wines rank. And then we go through and we then taste out the barrels. So the Cooper and the Oak and the Toast level that we use, now we rank out of our best lots that we identified qualitatively, what's our favorite oak profile that we enjoy. So then from there, now we have the creme de la creme ranked down in rank order qualitatively. And we'll start to put our blends together. We start out with our highest bottling, our $135 Vineyard Designate Cabernet Sauvignon, and then we work downwards all the way through our different price points. That's how we handle it. So when we get to a wine like the Cabernet that we're drinking right now, which is our red label cab, we actually still have a tremendous amount of great things to work with. So it doesn't become a kitchen sink blend of, well, this is what we have left over, throw it together, and we're good to go. No, we're still very much meticulous in terms of blending out quality at that time. You got to remember, the stuff that's $135, we're only doing 2 barrels of that a year. So it's very, very, very small amount of wine.
That's 50 cases.
Go ahead.
That's 50 cases. 2 barrels. A barrel's about 25 cases, so he's talking like 50 case production. Super small winery, wine club only.
Yeah, wine club only. In fact, that wine club has been closed down since last year. So we, it's just that we don't try to grow it because we'd be cutting into the production of our other stuff. And then the next level is our VR Special Cab, which is named after my brother-in-law Chad's grandfather, Vernon Rhodes. And so that's our next level, and that retails right around 62, and that's a little bit can get into distribution. Wisconsin can find some bottles of that from time to time. We tend to ship out stuff out of the library, so it's got some more age on it. I think the current vintage in Wisconsin at the distributor is like 2012. That retails, like I say, between $60 and $70 a bottle usually in the market. That's our next level, and that's only 400 cases. So then we get to the Dusted Valley. The Dusted Valley is right around 1,000 cases, the red label that we're drinking right now. And when you think about it in terms of production, 1,000 cases is virtually not a lot of wine. It's just not a lot of wine. So what we're focusing on when we blend this wine is we want varietal character. So that's why you always see our wines being high 80s, at least high 80% cab. And then we typically are blending in a little bit of either Merlot or Petit Verdot. Those are the ones we tend to lean on the most. And those 2 varieties will tend to give more mid-palate richness, and Petit Verdot tends to drive length and richness in the wine. Petit Verdot tends to have more richness than Cabernet in the mid-palate, and it also tends to have higher acid, which will drive the finish in the wine. So almost all of the wines at Dusted Valley have a blend, especially on the Bordeaux side, are blended. And this is very consistent with like Bordeaux as a premier producer of Cabernet Sauvignon in the world. Many times, very, very few wines are 100% varietal in Bordeaux. And so we take that model at Dusted Valley as well. Malbec, which is one of my favorite varieties, we use that to polish. And Malbec is like our little secret sauce. Many times they'll find 2-3% Malbec into our vintage. And that's just like a little bit of a beautiful polish. Just kind of takes some of those fine grain tannins up front and polishes them just a little bit through the mid palate to match the tannin on the finish. So that's where blending becomes cooking, Ron, right? Where you're just looking for the right amount of balance, acid, going back to the analogy that you use in terms of the class. You're talking about the tannins and the acid and the counterplay there. So
and that small of percentage, and like we had a wine that was like 1%. That 1%, or in this case, the 2% Merlot, that actually makes a difference.
Tremendous. Let me ask you, here's a great question. when it comes to when we use the cooking analogy. You know, whenever you add acid to something, it doesn't take a lot of acid from whether it's fresh squeezed lime juice or lemon juice or you know you're using white vinegar or distilled vinegar. It doesn't take a lot of acid to brighten up a big pot of stew, right? So that's the same thing that happens with blending in wine. A very small percentage of the total volume can really change how the wine lives on your palate. And you mentioned acid as a component right straight away in terms of it's being striking to you, and that's really a hallmark of where it's grown as well. Washington tends to have higher acid than something from California, and it's going to be more on par acid-wise with something from Bordeaux than it is from California, just because we grow in a cooler climate. Believe it or not, my home sits on the 46th parallel, which literally is north of Lac de Flambeau, about 5 miles. The reason I know that is because I pulled up Google Earth one day and I said, where does my mailbox line up in northern Wisconsin? And I came right across, and I'm not even exaggerating, it came out to the middle of my mom and dad's lake in northern Wisconsin. So that's how far north we are, to give you a sense of our growing conditions.
You want to comment?
Yeah. What do you want to comment?
I actually don't want to comment on anything that I'm tasting. It's delicious. We had a question. Somebody chose to go with the Boomtown cab instead of the Dusted Valley. Can you please address that?
Yeah, absolutely. Boomtown, Dusted Valley's little brother, Ron and Lorene, have supported us with Boomtown so many times through the years, and Dusted Valley. And Boomtown is really, these wines are meant to be really enjoyed and drank. But I will tell you, the same level of care and thought goes into every single bottle of that wine that we're making. It's not a mass-produced wine by any stretch. Even if you find it, on a grocery store shelf, it's not a big production. The total volume of Boomtown Cab made every year is 8,000 9-liter cases. So that's the amount of wine that a company like Kendall Jackson or Chateau Ste. Michelle spill in a day. So it's a small amount of wine. It's a thimble. And so, to capture the quality of that wine, which, by the way, is usually consistently scoring between 80, 89 and 91 points every year, at $15, $16, $17 retail, it's a great bottle of wine. You don't have to feel any shame in ever opening up and sharing with even the biggest wine aficionado that you know, because there's character and quality in that bottle. There's a lot of varietal character, and we strive for that. A lot of times when you get down to prices of under $20, you start to find wines that become more red than varietal. And what I mean by that is Merlot and Cabernet and Syrah, they all kind of start tasting the same at that price point. And that's just because of the way they're made. And with the Boomtown Cabernet, you still get a lot of the same characteristics that you would in the Dusted Valley. So what's the difference? The difference is they're farmed at a different level. The Dusted Valley is farmed at about 3 to 3.5 tons per acre, which leaves us with about 145 gallons per ton, which leaves us usually with about 80 cases per acre. Whereas the Boomtown is closer to about 130 cases per acre in terms of the volume that we're pulling off the vineyard. A little fun fact on the Boomtown, about 10% of the blend is the Dusted Valley wine. And each year we sneak about 10% into it, just to give that wine just a little bit more richness, a little bit more concentration. But in order to keep that profitability where it needs to be so we don't go broke, we can't really go much beyond 10%. And that's really it. That's economics of wine. It's we try to produce something at different price points for people to spend that, when they want to spend money and not spend money.
I'm figuring it out.
Corey, we have a question. Somebody wants to know how many times, and these are my words, how often, how much, how many percentages, like little components, What are you doing to figure out your 1%, your 2%? How much work is that? Or how much fun is that? That's my question. How much fun is that?
And actually, I have a more important point, is that if you guys are starting the Bordeaux blending this week, I'm going to hop in my car tomorrow morning. I'm going to drive out to join you. Does that work for you?
Yeah, come on out, man. Not a problem. It turns out there's a lot of VRBOs that are empty right now. I'm sure that you would not have a problem finding a place.
If we were not remodeling our master bath right now, I would absolutely be there, but I got to finish the bathroom.
I'm actually just finishing a remodel project myself. We just put up some posts and beams in our house, and so that project was just finalized today. So that means more baseboard and painting to come this weekend. Memorial Day week. Here we go. Oh well, life is rough. But Maureen, back to your question about blending. We've been doing this for a few years. This is our 18th year, and so we've definitely have learned a lot about how we go about blending. We've also had the honor and privilege of being able to work with vineyards now for many, many years. So when we started out, the average vine age that we were working with was 5 years old, and today it's over 20. In fact, the wine that we're drinking right now has vines in it from 1971. So there's 1971 to about 2007. So there's a gamut of ages in there. So we really know how these vineyards kind of play together, and we also know how the varieties blend together as well. So when we get to a blend, the first thing we focus on is the main varietal. So tomorrow, if we're blending Cabernet, we're going to blend out our base Cabernet first, okay? Blend out the best Cabernet. And then from there, we know from our tastings and our qualitative analysis, we know that this Petit Verdot lot and that Malbec lot and that Merlot lot are going to bring these characteristics to the blend. So what we start with first is we start with the strongest component that we're trying to blend into the base wine, and we'll push that envelope. So typically, if we know we blend 2 to 3% Petit Verdot into a vintage, we're gonna try to push it. We're gonna break it, which means we're gonna do 10%. And when we do 10%, we go, okay, that broke the Cabernet because it steals the varietal character of the Cabernet, everything that we loved about the base wine. And now it's the varietal that we blended into it is taking over. It's stealing from the varietal character of the Cabernet. So then we start to back it off, and we back it off, and then we go too far. We back it off too far, and we're like, oh, I really like it. Now it's more Cabernet, but it's missing what I liked about the Petit Verdot. So now we bring it back, and then we settle in on what that might be, and that could be 0.5%.
So earlier you were talking about cooking, and I'm going to use that analogy. Is it very, very simplistic terms, like putting way too much salt in and then backing off and being like, okay, there's no salt in here at all? Almost that obvious.
100%. The difference that we're doing in blending is we're not adding salt to the pot. We're taking a microscopic amount of wine out by in terms of the total volume, and we're playing with that. So think about your cooking at home. If you had the time and the opportunity to fuss over every dinner that you cooked, where you could just take out samples of that and spice it and season it and then taste it in a line with 5 other samples, now all of a sudden you would be crafting something that was like, wow, that goes beyond the recipe. That's something that is speaking to me tonight. That's something that's speaking to me from an acid, savory, pepper, cumin, you name it, right? Smoked paprika, which is one of my favorites to work with in cooking. So
Totally get it. Yes. That was, we have some people who are geeking out and we love that, want to know why you're doing what you're doing, and that makes sense. So, yes.
Well, it's
I'm always a gatekeeper. Sorry, Ron, and sorry, Corey. We are at 10 after, and we try to be
Yes, she's cutting us off,
cutting you off.
even though we want to sit and drink more.
Well, you can sit and drink.
Well,
Let's see, we've got
that's
a couple
cool.
questions here. How long should we allow a wine to breathe? I think taste it immediately and then allow it to breathe. But
Which is if you taste it immediately and then in your glass it continues to evolve. That's the way that you sort of gauge and see what time in a glass offers, or decanting, quote unquote decanting. But yeah, sometimes the longer the better, sometimes not. But that's why you drink and be patient and don't just slam it all.
Enjoy it, cook with it, play around with it. At the end of the day, always remember wine is a beverage. It's meant to be enjoyed. It's no different than those of us who like a nice light beer after mowing the lawn on an 85-degree day. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a beverage, and it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be so scary. I think that's the biggest thing. If everybody who's geeking out tonight, if you can tell your friends that I listened to this guy and he made wine sound fun. To me, that's bigger than me being able to share all my geeky knowledge that I did with you tonight. It's fun to get on with you guys and geek out and push up the glasses, so to speak. But at the end of the day, I say just drink what you like, enjoy what you drink, enjoy it with people that you love, and have fun. Have fun. I just want to say thanks again to Ron.
In closing, we want to thank you. I'm going back to the bubble, not because I don't love Corey's wines, because I do, but
here. And we'll sign off. Cheers. Salute.
Sign off.
Happy anniversary.
I'm doing bubble.
I love it. Two-fisted.
Yeah.
Up to you guys.
Yeah.
Take care.
Corey, thank you very, very much. We appreciate it. And we're going to plan a trip out to the PNW here pretty quick.
And so is everybody on tonight. They're all coming out to see you.
Yeah, and a little message to everybody who's on tonight or who watches this afterwards. If you call the winery out there or the tasting room, because they've got a tasting room in Woodinville, or you want to go visit the tasting room in Walla Walla, and you drop them an email, you do something, just say, hey, we're from Wisconsin, we want to come on visit. These guys will show you the best time. I'm not going to promise Chardonnay daiquiris like we had, because that was kick ass. And Andre was like, oh my God. I looked at all of our pictures recently. I've got an old picture, I'll send it to you. But of Andre making Chardonnay daiquiris at the bar in your basement.
One of the best memories we have.
Yeah.
In our
and Buck and Melissa, who are on here tonight, they were out there with us. Yeah, absolutely incredible. But we're going to come out again soon.
Okay, we do have one quick thing, a housekeeping thing we have to address. Next week, nothing. The week after is Tilth. We did not address Tilth is coming to Vino Latte, and they're going to be on. So we're doing 3 Tilth wines June 1st.
Yeah, so super. I don't know if you would know them. They're super small.
Tiny.
Driscoll Wine Company. Jason and Hillary Driscoll, and they make Tilth wines and Hebrew wines, and we're going to do 3 of their Tilth labeled wines. Really small production. They have absolutely, seriously, like no reason that they're distributed in Wisconsin because they're so tiny, except that they're really good friends with one of the breakthrough executives in Milwaukee. So cool wines. We are, as just sort of a shout out to all of our customers, we're going to eventually be opening up actually next week, Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, in-person dining, like in the store dining.
The 26th, we're going to do in-shop dining. And we're going to continue this little foray with hopefully more winemakers. So, Corey, you're the first. We're looking forward to trying to get more people to sign on and do this. And
thank you, Corey. You set a precedence that's going to be hard to follow.
Impossible to follow.
Cheers,
Impossible.
guys. Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Soon.
Thanks, Roy.
Great.
Say hi to Cindy and Chad and Janet, and wish everybody the best. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Much appreciated. And on Wisconsin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cheers.
So to everybody else that's still sort of hanging out, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Watch our Facebook page. I'm going to text Corey the videos, the gifts of me pouring that big ass bottle, and I'm going to post them. I was trying to share them here, but I'm just going to post them online and see you, Corey. Thank you. And you guys can check them all out online on our Facebook page.
And in 2 weeks, we'll be back. Like I said, or Ron said, with Tilth, Driscoll Winery. Next week is off because I hope you all have an amazing Memorial Day. And we thank you. You're sorry for keeping you late. Thank you. Watch yourselves on the news tomorrow night because, as you heard, Channel
tonight.
7, or maybe even tonight,
I don't even know when.
the news was here.
Yep.
So thanks for supporting small and local and for supporting Vino Latte. And we'll see you all soon. And Ryan and I are going to have an amazing 18th wedding anniversary dinner.
What does that mean? Oh, dinner.
That means
Oh,
dinner.
dinner. Okay.
Dinner. We're going to have dinner. So
We got a
cheers, everybody.
we have a pile
Love
of
you all. Thank you.
we have a pile of steak that I'm
We
going
have
to drink
steaks.
this cab with. So, cheers, everybody. Thank you. We love you, and we look forward to seeing you.
We're at the shop
Or at the shop.
as of next Tuesday. Dine in.
We got the patio furniture set up.
So you can do that now.
Yeah. Yeah. Cheers, honey.
Love you.
I love you too. Good night, everybody.